Some say shut the flip up. Some say shut the flip up. Some say shut the flip up.
I want to thank you very much for being open to receiving a random DM from a stranger across the world. For anyone who may be listening, can I call you Bernie? Is that your?
Yeah.
Okay. I discovered Bernie through Instagram, and was fortunate enough to see some of your content, your videos, and in particular your beatboxing videos are super, super impressive.
I'm glad you reached out. I really appreciate it. I just want to, before we start, just acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which I talk to you from. So I live in Sydney, which is Gadigal land of the Eora Nation. And I just want to pay my respects to the elders of past and present and emerging, as this is, was, and always will be Aboriginal land.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I love your voice, the timbre of it. Both the timbre and the accent is just...
Yeah, it blows my mind a little bit because, when you come from a different country, you don't really notice your own accent. So until people comment on it,
Of course, because you're used to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'd like to start by just asking you if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and telling me and whomever may be listening at a later time who you are and how you would describe yourself as an artist and a person.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for those of you who do not know me, my name is Bernie Van Tiel. On stage, I go by BVT, and I am a Sydney-based R&B hip-hop artist. I rap, I sing, I produce music. I'm known predominantly for beatboxing. For those of you who aren't familiar with beatboxing, it's essentially making music with your voice, lips, teeth, tongue, vocal cords, everything. It's so bizarre. I think the closest relation that in layman's terms people could get to it is maybe Police Academy, where the guy makes all these sound effects and plays pranks on people and that sort of thing. But since then it's evolved into something bigger and more mainstream, and it's even becoming a point of bridging the gap between language barriers, which is phenomenal to watch. Also, I'm a queer person of color, and I'm very passionate about bridging the gap between hip hop and queerness, and just voicing and being seen and validating others through my music and through my motivation within that music.
Fantastic. Can you expand more on what you said about beatboxing bridging the gap between languages? That's so cool.
Yeah, so essentially, I think the closest related version of that is when, the famous quote, when words fail, music speaks. And it's basically, even within music, there are boundaries within language, but the limitation is broken through melody and the chords we choose and the key that we choose and the structure, etc., etc., etc. That's what moves us. But with beatboxing, it's really interesting to notice how people connect regardless of their language. They can all just speak the one language of beatboxing. When beatboxers get on stage, they have the Grand Beatbox Battle, which is the international competition, and everyone from all over the world comes and they compete and they showcase what they've got. And I'm talking worldwide, everyone from every corner of the world, and even from places that you probably haven't even heard of are there, and they're all doing the one thing, and they're all speaking the one language, which is beatboxing. So it's amazing to watch, and it's all available on YouTube or anywhere that you get your media. Swiss Beatbox is the biggest platform for that. Um, and each country has their own beatbox platform itself, but Swiss Beatbox is the umbrella that we all fit under.
Are there, as there are with languages, are there
Mhm.
certain syllables that people sort of adopt, like common syllables that are used?
Yeah, so the way that we do it is, and it's really interesting, and I'll get into it in a minute, the more detailed and nuanced perspectives of it. But uh, it's very phonic, the
Mhm.
language of beatboxing. And yes, it's very syllabic as well. But and they're like in the midst of trying to figure out a way to properly notate it, but because the voice is unique and so flexible, and a bunch of sounds are being made per minute, it's just a matter of trying to lock it in and group it and find the categories it can fit in order to notate it properly. But for the time being, it's all just, audible response. So you hear it and then you copy it, and they try their best to break it down as much as possible. So like will be BTK, or a technique feel like will be TKK. Um, and then they have other words or terms for things like those are throat bass. So, and then per throat bass are different categories within. So you've got like vibration bass, throat bass, nasal, inward bass, click roll, etc., etc., etc. And yeah, and like lip rolls, like and the way that we use them as well is completely in relationship to the microphone. So beatboxing would have started with just like cupping your hands around your mouth, then like trying to amplify the sound from there. But as it evolved and we got microphones involved and everything, we developed like techniques with the microphone. So you would cup the mic in a certain way to get a compression or a density on lower end sounds. Lip rolls were developed. Those sounds were developed to activate the subwoofers so that you would get this booming bass sound. So to the naked ear, if you're just doing it without a microphone, it's impressive enough. But then when you add it to the microphone and a whole entire sound system, it literally sounds like a sub or a bass line that you hear in like EDM music.
How do you learn to be in beatbox?
There's multiple approaches. So there's this inside joke in the beatbox community that we all just have ADHD, which to some people it really does ring true, because there's this common trait where we all need this constant stimulation, and like we can't just go. Some of us can't just go pick up an instrument and just noodle around on it, but our instrument is our voice. So we're constantly copying sounds or imitating things or just experimenting with how our voice can sound. And most of that starts off with an impression of a cartoon character or, a movie star or something, but then it really does, it moves into music and imitating instruments and that sort of thing, similar to how in jazz, we had scat and, we had like vocal trumpets and, even I think like mimicking guitar sounds, like guitar riffs and noodles and runs and all that sort of thing. So, it didn't come from nowhere. It really did come from, the roots of like Black music. And so within that, it's usually just like, hearing it and copying it and developing it into something ridiculous. But then you've got this new generation of beatboxers coming through that, um, funnily enough, they've got, they've got, they're just the product of their surroundings. They've got the internet, so my generation, were there just for the kind of like the birth of YouTube. And we got like the early days of YouTube where people were just still walking into that world and were at a particular level. And so we got our exposure to that, which is great. But then you've got like 13-year-olds coming through with insane techniques that have taken people 15 years to develop, because they're just
Wow.
immediately exposed to it. They see it and they go, oh, that's my entry level, let's do that. And then
Right.
they develop these ridiculous sounds and techniques that are supposed to be ridiculously complicated, but because it's already their entry level point, they're only going to raise the bar further and further and further. And then the
Right.
next generation and the next generation is probably going to do the same. But
Okay, I mean, I relate to this because I'm also in the classical world. Each generation just gets better and better and better.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
The pedagogy just gets more and more developed. I'm not sure if it's a product of the internet in this case, but it very well could be. I mean, if you're constantly exposed to other people doing your craft really, really well, then you're getting that auditory reinforcement all the time, and then you're
mm-hmm.
constantly able to continue to develop yourself. um,
Mm.
so I can see how there would be kids that are just crazy good beatboxers
Yeah, yeah,
out.
it's like almost infuriating
Right.
because you're going, oh man, that took me 15 years to get. How are you doing this straight off the bat? But like the best part about our community is that we want everyone to be a beatboxer. We want everyone to be the best they can be, and we celebrate how the more ridiculous things get. We celebrate it because I don't know. I can't explain it in words alone. I think it's something that everyone, when they get the opportunity, needs to go experience. Whether they save up and travel to the GBB, whether they save up and travel to a local event. Um, it's just this universal community that we're all super inclusive and weird,
Mhm.
super weird people. I cannot stress that enough.
How so? How are they weird? How are you weird?
It's just like when you find your tribe and your community and language ceases to exist, and you're mostly communicating through onomatopoeia. I also used to hold an open mic night once a month at my house, my old house,
Amazing.
because it was just this beautiful open plan. We just scored with the rental board. Like we just walked into it. It was cheap. It was open. It was amazing.
Mhm.
So we really struck lucky, my housemates and I at the time, and it was just perfect for creative people. And so once a month, I invited all my creative friends and I said, if you know anyone who's creative, bring them along. Everyone's welcome. And we used to just set it up with beautiful lights and proper equipment. And yeah, it was just like a safe space for creatives to um, test their content, no matter whether they were seasoned or brand new.
Mhm.
And everyone just listened so intently because it was a really intimate space. But just at like maybe like 11 p.m., the magic hour would happen where all the beatboxers would just get up and
Mhm.
start beatboxing together. So you'd have like four beatboxers on a mic, and it would just turn into this like very microscopic warehouse rave because of like how good it sounded. It sounded like an actual sound system. And we
Wow.
used to live next door to a university, and they would come over, the campus police would come over and be like, can you turn the music down? We're like, mate, what music? There's
Uh,
literally just four of us on a mic. And they're like, oh, um but Australia has always just been a country that's really based off of like yeah mate syndrome. Like it's really into the sports and rugby and um that sort of world thrives. And even though like our gross domestic product for our economy is like 40% agriculture, and then I think underneath that the next highest percentage is the arts, and then the lowest percentage, or the second lowest percentage, is sports. Even though sports has such a low percentage of income for Australia's economy, it is the most celebrated.
hmm.
Um, so, and I like don't want to put my finger in it, but it is like old white dudes in power, essentially. and, you know, them expressing their policies and making those choices for people who aren't like them. So it's never just seen as like an essential thing to be an artist. They're not really given the props that they deserve or the support that they deserve. So it's not to say that Australia is like this horrible place and no one gets what they need or anything like that. Like, it's, I will acknowledge the privilege that we still do have being the country that we are, and a beautiful country at that. It's just that when you put it on a grand scale and compare it to the other things that get more attention or more funding, there's a very big difference between all of them. And it is super dependent on what state you're from as well. So, for example, there will be more grants going out in Melbourne than there will be in Sydney. So, you know, Victoria versus New South Wales is very different perspectives on the arts, which is why a lot of people move to a particular city in order to get what they need, because there's just more available.
Yeah, I don't think people realize how deeply ingrained the arts is. You
Yeah.
know, how many facets of life artists and creative people, and even just the creative sensibilities, how much it nurtures everything around us, how much it
Mm-hmm.
creates everything around us, how much those type of people add to our societies.
Completely.
Yeah. I
It's
noticed in your Instagram bio you do have TikTok.
Mhm.
Um, when did you start on that platform, and what have been the benefits for you since you're still on it? So there must be some.
I have a love-hate relationship with TikTok. I downloaded it as a joke initially.
It always
Just
starts that
it
way.
always starts that way. What a sucker. So yeah, I did it as a joke. Um, just be like, oh, how funny would it be? And then and it was during our proper pandemic when it all first started. And I was stuck out west. I was bored. Um, and you know, my brain needing something to do and somewhere to be. Got TikTok, and the first thing I did was just upload a beatbox video, and it just went viral, and I was like, oh god damn it. So that's how they hook you. Something does well, and then you feel like there's this constant demand for entertainment from you. And I absolutely love to entertain, but I like to do it in person. Online is a very different thing. Um, and anyone else that I've spoken to that does well on TikTok, my partner included, they also have this strange relationship with it. And the algorithms don't make sense. The different niches don't make sense. The like areas that you go to don't make sense. So there's like straight TikTok versus queer TikTok. There's beatboxer TikTok. There's ADHD TikTok. There's all these different avenues that and worlds that exist
Right.
based off of what you follow, and that's the only logical algorithm that makes sense. But um, it's so easy to kind of be in your own world and not really understand where other people exist, which can be such a dangerous place to be, especially if you're young and impressionable. You can get into a very specific place in TikTok and not really understand where the rest of the world is or what they're thinking. So unless you're exposed to multiple platforms of media and real life, then you know you're going to be a pretty one-dimensional human. um, but for some people it's less of a detriment and more of a safety. It's where they can express their true identity. It's where they can be themselves, especially in the LGBT community. If you're fortunate enough to be in that bubble, and not be around people who are discriminating against you, if you're very, very, and I stress very fortunate enough to have that experience, then that place becomes your place of safety. as someone who is doing pretty okay on TikTok, I still, and same as my partner, I think my partner would say the same thing. It's like, maybe don't do it. Because it's also a platform like any other social media app. Um, it's a platform for the wrong people too,
Mm.
you know. And if you're not careful, you might enter those spaces, and if your mental health isn't, you know, constantly being maintained, then it's a tricky place to be sometimes.
So how many is it called followers on TikTok?
I guess, yeah.
How many followers do you have
How
on
vain. Come, my followers. I don't
approximate?
know. I did a viral video, which again, I didn't mean to. It just happened again. It doesn't make
Don't
sense.
be so modest.
But it doesn't. It doesn't make sense. But I got like 10K followers in one day just based off
Holy.
of that. So I'm sitting on, just from one video, I'm now sitting on 57.1K. And before that, I was
Wow.
on 40K for
Wow.
like 10 months because I just wasn't doing anything on TikTok.
Wow.
And if
Okay.
you're not careful, like, some things do get shadow banned.
Shadow ban.
So
And what would you have to
yeah,
do to get shadow banned?
I don't know, be gay, black, or anything else. Like, honestly, a lot of minority groups, and this is the big controversy with TikTok and Instagram, is that a lot of minority groups, depending on their hashtag or depending on how they spell something in the video, um, TikTok will pick up on it.
So what does it feel like to have that many people watching what you do? Like,
It's interesting you bring that up because I'm actually bringing out a new song soon. Um, and I was just in a pitch meeting last week with my team about the music video. And the music video was kind of floating with the idea of um, being influencers, but taking that into the real space, and the idea that so many people are just watching you, and understanding where the performative aspect of your life comes from and the genuine aspect of your life comes from,
mhm.
and whether people watch both or not. For my partner, because she's specifically aiming at LGBTQ plus community, and also she's a massive advocate for mental health days and everything. She speaks to our community and ties that into it because she knows how heavily our community is affected
Mhm.
by mental health issues, and the way that society and our government as well treats mental health. So, and especially the community's mental health as well. So she's hyper aware of it, and she dedicates a ton of her time to it. She specifically outlines one day just to listen to people, ask them questions, give them support, and also like outline other facilities or communities or projects that are there for people that need help. So, and she'll give them those links or those services or anything like that.
Mm.
Um,
That's
so
beautiful. That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, she's great like that.
Good for her. What's her name?
Emma Horn.
Does she consider herself an influencer? Like, would she label herself as such?
I've had that discussion with her before, and she's at one stage said no. But I don't. I consider her an influencer. I consider anyone, and I don't really think about the following. I think about anyone who is, to the term influential, an
Right.
influencer.
Right.
Anyone who can speak to the masses or speak to one person, they are an influencer. But for the like pop culture term, I still consider her that. But she doesn't consider herself an influencer until she gets a certain number of followers. Not that long ago, she was like, I just want to get to 10K. I just want to get to 10K and I'll be fine. Because when you get to 10K, you get the swipe up link on Instagram, where you can
Right.
attach anything you want. And she got to 10K in no time. And then suddenly and that was a good moment. We celebrated that, and I was really proud of her because she wanted to do something and she achieved it.
Mhm.
But then now and she's sitting on like 20 something K, and she's like, I just want to get to 100K. I just want to get to 100K. And I'm like, where do you feel happy with this? Like, I know she's happy with it, as happy as you can be with any social media presence. Because I know it's a bit of a battle, being a social media presence at all. But yeah, I think that she's just very motivated, and she really wants to um, get to as best as she can be in that platform.
It's reminding me of this old sort of Buddhist proverb as you were speaking, where it says, the things you desire give no more satisfaction than drinking seawater. Which is,
Whoa.
yeah, which is one of the things I have this little book. It's the teacher is Atisha. He's um in the Mahayana lineage, but I'm sure all sorts of traditions study his teachings. But uh it so encompasses our culture in general, and is exhibited, I think, in all of us to some degree, is whether it's like a new car or a new piece of clothing or anything. It's like, as soon as we have it, we want something else, right? We want
Yeah,
more.
definitely. That's a discussion that my partner and I have often, just to keep ourselves in check,
Mm-hmm.
especially because we live in a society that's built off of the pursuit of financial stability.
Mm-hmm.
And because we're both creatives and we've dedicated our lives to being creative people, that income will fluctuate day in and day out. When I would go visit the Philippines when I was younger, and I lived there for a little bit as well, um, the quality of life and the ratio of happiness there was weird. It was harder for me to find my happiness for some time because I was so displaced, compared to my um, cousins that grew up there and lived there and everything. And there's this idea that they look at Australia and America and Canada as the world of opportunity, the land of opportunity, where you will go and you'll work and you'll be rich and you'll send money back to your family. That's like the basic formula in the Philippines. They go, okay, I'm going to get my nursing degree. I'm going to be a nurse over in a better country and send money back because the dollar inflation value ratio, etc., is just it's better than my country. I'll feed my family is like the perspective. But then it gets to this point where they go, and then I'll be happier because I'll have these things, and I'll have a country that's like better, and I'll have more of this, more of that, more of this, more of that. And it doesn't always ring true. Like I have a cousin in the Philippines now. Like, my family is like, oh, you guys should really get your education, get your degrees, get your certificates, get your this, get your that, and come to Australia and work, and it'll be great. You'll really love it here, and blah, blah, blah. And I have one cousin who's like refuses. He's like, no, I'm really, really happy here because all you guys do is work and run yourselves down
Mm.
for everything else. And I look at your quality of life and I don't like it compared to mine. He's like, I have it simpler here. I do have my work here, but I also have my roots and I have my family and I have things that work for me. If you're directly correlating success and happiness together, you're going to find yourself in a very tricky situation, because depending on what you determine success to be will then determine, in your mind at least, what happiness is.
Mm-hmm.
So for a lot of my artist friends who are signed to labels at the moment, they're like, before that, they were like, my level of happiness and idea of success is that I get to do what I love to do. Not even just for a living, that I just get to do what I love to do, which is make music.
Right.
And then they'll get signed to a label and they'll be like, oh, I'll just be happy when I make it. And I'm
Mm.
like, what
What
does
is
that
making it?
look, yeah, what does that
Yeah.
look like to you? And like, I don't
Mhm.
think that's true, because once you quote make it, there's all these other levels of responsibilities that you have for your career now, and all these other schedules and times and things. Like, what does making it look like to you? What does, and then in turn, what does happiness look like for you? You
Mhm.
know?
Do you notice any parallels between using the muscles in your mouth, the vocal cords, these instruments you have for beatboxing versus also the acting element?
Yeah, definitely. So for one, when I did this Christmas campaign, so the whole idea behind this Christmas one was like, the pandemic had been happening. Christmas was kind of canceled in a way, and um, I guess things were just feeling a bit grim. So to kind of put smiles back on people's faces, the team that organized it came up with this commercial where there was this Santa that was doing synchronized swimming, with all of these products that were available at this store. And they were just like, Christmas gifts that you could consider, or like amazing things that are a discounted rate that you could buy so that you could put on the feast that you always wanted. And the track was this amazing hip hop, UK hip hop track called Squad. And it was just so vivid but brilliant, and it was comedic and it was fun. So I did the like television and radio and social media spots for that. And while I was promoting these products, I was also getting called back in for other radio spots where they would um, use comedic elements to sort of get the point across that they're selling these products. Yeah. Um, but I would like be the voice of the mouth and then the voice of the stomach. And we'd be talking about like really delicious cherries that you can buy for Christmas, and
Mhm.
um, getting to put on different voices for them and flexing the muscles around the vocal cords and everything to,
Mhm.
um, and the way you use your mouth and everything to shape, I guess, an accent in that as well. It was,
Mhm.
yeah, the most fun that I'd had in a voiceover session in a while. I was also the voice of an intergalactic clitoris for the Wild Secrets sex store campaign.
Wow.
And they were
I'm
all about.
tempted to make that the title of this episode.
You're welcome. Yeah, that was all about bridging the gap, bridging the orgasm gap between um, I guess, people that have, like, to be more inclusive, people that have vaginas or clitorises and people who have penises. Mm.
I want to ask you about freestyling because I saw one of your videos where you were freestyling as I was
Oh
doing
yeah.
research on you. Um, and I've always been blown away by that. I would always be thinking, what is going through their minds? How are they getting into a state of mental flow that they're able to seamlessly sort of connect ideas in that way?
I think flow state is a state of mind you enter when you lose inhibition and you don't worry so much about trying to connect the dots, because the dots will connect by themselves if you just trust.
Hmm.
So you've been speaking this language for as long as you could. You know what words make sense. You know what words rhyme. You know what words, like on a subconscious level, because language is second nature, right? It's just
Mm.
there. But when you get put on the spot and when you decide to do something and people are going to be listening, your inhibition and your barriers come up to protect you, because your consciousness goes, oh, I don't want to look like an idiot.
Mhm.
I want to look really good at this. I want to, and then you start to care what people think, and then you start to care too much what you think. And
Mm.
then you start to lose out on your flow state. And so that is what I at least believe.
Okay, here's a question though. I mean, relating it to performance anxiety, for
Mm.
example,
Oh yeah.
when you in any kind of performance, when you're getting to in your left brain and you're in real time critiquing what you're doing, and that's getting in the way of achieving that flow state, in this case not verbal, with ideas and verbiage, but more so in the execution of playing your instrument, for example. um how do you, because it's very hard to simulate that environment, it's very hard to simulate that feeling. So you can practice the execution of the various motions needed to complete the task, let's say. But in this case, because freestyling, let's compare it to improvising. So you're not practicing a rap in the sense that you have something written down and you're then reciting it. This is connected, associated ideas flowing through you. How do you practice getting into that flow state when you're not actively in it?
Honestly, I just put on instrumentals like when I'm
Okay.
in the car, and it has to be when I'm doing something else. So if I'm driving, for example, it helps because I'm operating two sides of the brain. Um,
Oh,
so I have to like be aware of like turn signals and road signals and other cars and other people and that
okay.
sort of thing. Which again, like I've been driving for a long time, so it's not hard to do.
Okay.
Um, and then when I'm freestyling, like my my language will be the first thing to go. Like it's the same as when I'm listening to trying to listen to something and talk to someone at the same time. My
Mhm.
voice will be the first thing to go because I'll be listening to whatever's over there first. Um, so my driving won't be the first thing to go. It'll be my freestyling. So when I'm driving and I'm trying to freestyle to a track, it's kind of like that. It's just sort of simulating this like um notion that there's so much going on and so much that I'm paying attention to.
It's also creating an environment where you're practicing when your mind is sort of relaxed, which is very useful, right? Like if you're practicing always at 100% hyper focus, then that sort of gives rise to more overthinking in a sense.
Yeah, I think it's like when like an artist is listening to music while painting or drawing. There's just like two different things going on at the same time. um yeah, and if you, it'll either get you into a relaxed state of mind and you can just kind of let go of that inhibition, or you'll be hyper distracted, and so you have to work through the obstacles, and then working through those obstacles will become of benefit anyway, because when you're in an environment that caters to your performance a bit better, you you've done the work. So it's like
Mhm.
flexing a muscle, and then you need to lift this thing, it's not so heavy anymore.
Yeah, yeah. That's really cool. I think I will let you go. I really appreciate you meeting, especially at this relatively early hour for you.
Oh, it's really not that early.
You should come on the podcast again, but if you ever want to
Sure.
chat, I'd love to. It's
Absolutely. I love
yeah.
new friends. Take
Okay.
care, and thank you for the conversation.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
thank you very much.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.